Today we're at Sun Rivers. Sun Rivers is on First Nations land. Kamloops Indian Band, or Kamloops Indian Band, has a crown lease or head lease for 99 years with the federal government, with the crown. People who have property up here and live in these houses have a 99-year prepaid lease with the crown. That's what the structure is. Property tax goes to Kamloops Indian Band instead of the city of Kamloops. There's a private utility company up here, which is another big difference. We wanted to find out what this system is about and what this new ILTI, Indigenous Land Titles Initiative, is all about, which proposes a vastly different model than the current model here at Sun Rivers. We sat down with the chair of the Tulo School of Indigenous Economics, Michael LeBoudais, to find out more.
We proposed some legislative change. That's it. We proposed to change Section 2 of the Indian Act, where it says the minister shall own the reserves. It'll say the minister shall own the reserves except for, and then identify those 10 or 12 communities that want to own their own lands. And so once that happens, we'll create a torrent system for First Nations on reserve housing. And so all these houses can be entered into that torrent system, be recognized by financial institutes, by bailiffs, by realtors, by anybody. And so that anybody can come here and, respecting the bylaws of the local community, whether it be Kamloops, Whispering Pines, or whatever, build a home that they want with financing that they secure, and leave the whole Indian Band and the Indian Act out of the deal. And so that's the next logical step. This is, although it's beautiful, it's very cumbersome. The next logical step after land leasing is torrent system and ownership and title. The difference between Kamloops Indian Band and Kamloops City is described in legal terms on a piece of paper. It's all the same area, it's all the same country, it's all the same soil. But the difference is Ottawa gets in the way when we're trying to build a house here. And so we're trying to remove Ottawa from that equation and restore the values that this land once had. One of the stories that I shared when we first started this was, I remember my grandfather telling me his grandfather owned property before there was an Indian Act. And so this is in the mid 1800s. He bought and paid for a property in and around Lillooet. And so he owned hundreds and hundreds of acres. He bought a ranch. And so when the Indian Act came and they put a reserve around his property, he didn't own it anymore. There's no such thing as certificates of possession or anything back in that day. It was just, this is an Indian reserve, you need, you need permission to leave and permission to hunt and all that stuff. And so the value that land had was taken away by the Indian Act. The benefits that are available to Canadians today that don't live on reserve, that own homes off reserve. Example I always use is my sister. I begged her not to build her house on a reserve beside my dad's house, because at the time I was a banker and I understood that on her balance sheet you would strike off home if it was on an Indian reserve. So she would have a $105,000 home, we would just put a line through it at the bank and adjust her balance sheet accordingly. I knew she would have $1,000 payments for 100 months, and I didn't want her to do that. I wanted her to buy a home off reserve where it would have value. And so with this, it will restore the value of that home. A house doesn't know if it's on reserve or not. I mean, it's crazy that you can spend that much money building a home and never own it. Well, right now they're getting almost full value, like with these leases. So you have a 99-year lease and the clock started ticking. And so the idea is at the end of the 99 years that the government just renews the lease. That's not written in stone anywhere. And so when you get towards the end of the lease, the value will start to shrink because it's threatened by turning into Indian Reserve again. And so what ILTI will do is just remove the lease. and these people will have fee simple title on reserve. So the underlying title will always be Kamloops Indian Band, but they'll have fee simple title on top of it. And so they'll pay their taxes and all that towards the Kamloops Indian Band, but they'll always enjoy the full value of their homes. The bulk of Indian bands in Canada are in British Columbia. We have there's 606 Indian bands across Canada, and 203 of them are in British Columbia. I don't know why. It's has something to do with how they did the surveys. They started the treaties at the east, and it came to us and never really got to British Columbia. So we have more bands here than per capita than we do in the rest of Canada. So it's kind of lopsided. So when we try to do any kind of development, it takes a little longer because our regional office is in Vancouver, and they're short-staffed, if you will, or inadequately staffed. And so for us to do water systems or sewer systems or any of that stuff just takes a long time because there's the administration is just not there. And so when you do ILTI, when you do a Torrens system on reserve, it changes all that. All of a sudden it becomes local. All that stuff gets done here, not in Vancouver. It gets done here, and it gets done quickly.